This image could represent any family getting ready for the first day of school. This story takes place in 1960, where everything is different based on your skin color. And this is how the education in the United States changed.
Racial segregation goes far back. Long ago, it was said that African Americans were less intelligent and less capable than white-skinned people. During these times, African Americans were used as slaves and then be differentiated in each public space as an inferior person. Starting from the bus, the church, and then even school, those were all priorities for white people. High-level schools were reserved for the whites that were created in people of color who did not, according to the white people, take advantage of the opportunities that they were given. But finally, in 1954, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that segregation was unconstitutional and somehow demanded in schools to begin the process of integration of people of color. Maybe it was a coincidence. Nobody knows. But on this date, former civil rights activist Ruby Bridges was born. She was a black girl who lived in the state of New Orleans, who could not go to the schools with a high qualified education. By the time she turned 6 years old, Washington, D.C. was exerting pressure to the southern state would carry out the integration process in its white schools. What most schools decided to do was give out a test, a really difficult test to children who wanted to join the school. There were around 100 children who took the test in New Orleans, only 6 of which passed. One of them was Ruby Bridges. Although there were 6 children who achieved it, most of their parents did not want their children to go to a place where they were more likely to be insulted, threatened, or not looked after. But Ruby's parents were different. They wanted to be a part of the change. They wanted the history of race equality to begin to be written down, and for their children to have a real chance in the future. On November 14th, 1960, it was the first day for Ruby at William Frantz School. On her first day, many neighbors came to help her prepare for school and help their mother as well. When her mother opened the door of her house, there were 4 federal marshals to escort the girl and her mother to the school, as the marshal of other bodies refused to protect them. Ruby's parents had decided not to tell her about the attacks she was most likely to receive from the white parents when they arrived at school. Could you imagine how terrified her parents were? This decision meant leaving their little girl in a place where she would surely be rejected. But they knew that to receive a big change, they would have to take great risks. When they got there was a large crowd of white, angry people who shouted and threw objects showing that she was not welcome. So that day and several days later, that poor girl, only 6 years old, faced the cruelty of being expected at the entrance from her school with a coffin with a black doll inside of it. That first day, they kept her in the principal's office the whole time. When she entered school that day, the white parents began to rush in to take out their children. The teachers refused to teach the girl, all except one. Her name, Barbara Henry, a teacher who had just arrived from Boston. She received the girl and became her educator and best friend, the only one she had in school. She taught Ruby for an entire year with no other children in the classroom.
And shouting and chanting 2, 4, 6, 8. We don't want to integrate.
The mothers of downtown New Orleans screaming at a Negro child as she entered the William Frantz Elementary School, first in the city to be integrated.
Once I got into school, all of these people here rushed inside of the building. Mrs. Henry had a huge impact on my life. Mrs. Henry became my best friend, so she wasn't just my teacher. She was my only friend in school. The mere fact that I didn't have other kids to play with, It was just her and I, and she made school fun, so she really made a huge impression on me.
Over time, the children began to integrate into the school little by little, without any communication with Ruby. The girl had to go through the cruelty that the white parents taught their children, and understood what the crowds outside were really there for, when a child said that he could not play with her because his mother had forbidden him because she was a nigger.
You know, I was so excited, so I went in to play with them. This little boy looked at me and he said, "I can't play with you. My mom said not to play with you because you're a nigger. It's not Mardi Gras. This isn't college. It's about me. It's about me and the way I look and the color of my skin."
Ruby's parents were also victims of the cruelty of everyone around them. At one point, Ruby's father doubted that the 6-year-old girl continued to have to deal with the consequences of attending a white school, since for them, it had been difficult to face the rejection, the dismissal of his work, and that even stores decided not to sell food to him or his wife. However, they remained firm in their decision over time. Fortunately, a good white man got in their way with his wife to help them. His name, Robert Coles. At that time, he was a kind of psychologist who studied the reaction of children during very special and very specific situations, which offered help disinterested and maximum support to the Bridges family.
Strong she was, going through this kind of living hell. 200 people waiting at 8:30 in the morning to tell her they were going to kill her. 200 people in the afternoon telling her they were going to kill her. 25 federal marshals taking her into that building. What would you expect? You'd expect that a child going through that would pretty soon would start developing symptoms and be in trouble. I waited, and there weren't any symptoms, and she kept going and learning and being the Ruby that she was, a normal 6-year-old black child, very poor background. Parents didn't even know how to read and write. Humble people.
It was a long time before the situation improved. It also took a long time before Ruby was accepted simply as another student and a possible friend of other children. This was undoubtedly one of the greatest steps towards integration of one of the most racist states in the United States in the 1900s. It's amazing how to this day, some people still judge others because of their nationality, politics, religion, social status, physical appearance, and many other things. It is incredible how even today in schools, we can see children rejected by some who think they are superior, and we should be aware of the damage that this does to us as a society. We must take actions that allow the integration of each person to the different spaces, as well as those that began in the 1900s, and thanks to which many people have had opportunities with which they could only dream of before.
My name is Samuel Morillo, and I am different.
As each one of you who are listening to me, each of us has something that makes us different. Thanks to the courageous actions of these people for many years that made the integration process easier every time, I was able to start a new educational life in this country only 3 years ago, when I arrived for the first time. I can only feel a percentage of what Ruby felt. I was a different one. I came from a different country without knowing how to speak the language, without knowing the everyday habits, or what was right and wrong. The only difference between my situation and Ruby's situation is that in my school, I wasn't rejected or threatened. My parents, my brother, and I overcame the fear, and to this day, we are still on our feet. I am one of those people who have to be grateful for the actions taken by Aben and Lucille Bridges, because without their decisions, other people would have not gotten encouraged, possibly, and taken action. which could mean that we would still be in the same situation like the people in the 20th century. But we have to understand that what this is really all about is that it does not matter how we look from the outside. It doesn't matter where we are born or what language we speak. Those things we do not decide, and they do not define us. What defines us are our actions and what we do to make our small spaces a better place. At the end of the day, we are all human beings, how Ruby Bridges likes to say. We are all born with a clean heart. She became a civil rights activist, and for my part, I try not to reject or mistreat others, and this project helped me to give a message. It is good that every day we think about what we are doing to make this world a better place.